The Salvation Army ladies came up here in the fall of 1897, and they climbed up the Chilkoot Trail, each one of those ladies carrying her own ton of goods. It was a great struggle for them, but they finally all did make it all the way to Dawson City. Now, those ladies were not here to mine for gold. They were here to try to save some souls. But those fellas in Dawson were a pretty rough bunch, so I'm not too sure how many souls those ladies were actually able to save. But you have to admire them for having had the courage and the strength to have made the trip. Now, another lady that came up in the late fall of 1897 was named Emma Kelly. She was a newspaper reporter for the Kansas City Star. She tried to hire some Tlingit Indians to be her packers, to carry her newspaper and photographic equipment up over the pass. The Tlinkits often hired themselves out as professional packers because they were used to carrying heavy loads up over the pass. But they refused to work for Emma Kelly because she came very late in the season, and they thought that the weather was going to turn really bad in the pass. So they didn't want to work for her. Emma then hired some crew members from one of the ships in town to carry her stuff. The crew members and Emma made it about halfway up the pass when the weather turned really bad, just like the Tlingit Indians thought it would. So the crew members wanted to quit. But Emma Kelly said to them, "Come on, guys, if you quit on me now, I'll have to carry this stuff all by myself." And she was able to persuade the crew members to continue. And so with a great struggle, they finally did all make it to Lake Bennett, where they built their boats. And when the spring thaw came, they launched their boats and they sailed down the Yukon River. Now, back then it was the policy of the Mounted Police of Canada to stop all the boats just before the Class 5 rapids. The Mounted Police would make the women and children get out of those boats, and would make the women and children walk around the rapids and then reboard the boats at the bottom of the rapids. When Emma Kelly's boat approached the Mounted Police post, she refused to get out of her boat, and she sailed her boat right down through those rapids. Emma Kelly enjoyed it so much, she actually hiked back up the rapids, stowed away on somebody else's boat, and sailed down through those rapids one more time. She was a very defiant, but a very brave lady. Another interesting story for you is back in 1867, when the U.S. first acquired Alaska as a territory, the federal government declared it to be Indian Territory. So the sale of alcohol was forbidden by law. The federal government didn't want the Indians to get it, you see. But the Tlingit Indians were way ahead of the federal government because they already made their own alcohol, and in fact, they sold it to the prospectors. The Tlingits made their alcohol from molasses, and they called it hoochinu. What do you think the prospectors called it? They called it hooch. The expression hooch for alcohol came originally from the Tlingit Indian word hoochinu. Not many people know that, but now you folks do. So someday you can use that in a bar bet and maybe win yourselves some free hooch. Another expression for you was the expression sourdough. That came originally from prospectors carrying a small amount of raw bread dough in a buckskin pouch underneath their clothing, right up against their skin. They carried it there so that the bread dough would stay nice and warm, because if that bread dough ever froze, it would kill the yeast in the dough, and they would never be able to make another loaf of bread as long as they lived in the wilderness, which is where those fellas lived. After a while, those guys started to smell yeasty and sour, and they became known as sourdoughs. I had a young girl on my bus a few weeks ago that said, "Oh, I'll never eat another piece of sourdough bread again." I guess she still thinks it comes from some miner's armpit. But who knows, these days that bread might be safer if it did, because of some of the chemicals they put in bread these days. Coming up, we're going to see the Skagway School. Kindergarten through 12th grade are all in the one building. The average student population in the school in a given school year is only about 100 students for the entire school. So the classes are very small. A few years ago, the graduating class was 3 boys and 1 girl. She was voted the most popular girl in class. She was the prom queen, the homecoming queen, and the head cheerleader. And just think, in a class that size, even the worst student could put on their resume, I graduated in the top 4 of my class. Coming up, we're going to see a blue building on the left-hand side with some playground equipment out in front of it. That is the Skagway Recreation Center. Inside that building is something interesting. In a city that is completely surrounded by mountains, inside that building is an artificial rock climbing wall. Right here we're going to turn onto State Street, and this is where Captain Moore's cabin was before it was towed away. The ringleader of towing away Captain Moore's cabin was none other than Frank Reed, the hero from the cemetery. Frank Reed was a claim jumper, but worse than that, before Frank Reed came to Skagway, he was acquitted of murder charges. He had pled self-defense, but the victim had been shot in the back. So Frank Reed was a pretty unsavory character too, just not quite as bad as Soapy Smith, but pretty close. Coming up, we're going to see the Skagway Library on the right-hand side. Right over here to our right, behind those birch trees. And the tan building here is the Chamber of Commerce. And a little further up is another tan building, which is the Skagway Fire Department. Just beyond this weathered building is another tan building with a green truck body out in front of it, which is the only supermarket in Skagway. It's called the Fairway Market, but some of the locals call it the Unfair Markup. We have 1 supermarket in Skagway, 1 gas station, 1 bank, 1 hardware store, 1 video rental place, and 1 liquor store, but lots of jewelry stores. But those jewelry stores are only here because the people in the cruise ships love to buy jewelry. So I'm sure that's the reason they're all here. And some of them are actually operated by the ship's companies. I think like this one that says Diamonds by Princess, I have a feeling that is operated by Princess Cruise Lines. But I'm not positive of that, but I wouldn't be surprised. So here we are back in town again. I hope you all enjoyed the tour.